You walk through the front door of the house you grew up in, or perhaps you simply answer a phone call from a parent, and within minutes, sometimes within seconds, something shifts. The confidence you have built over years, the life you have carefully constructed, the person you have worked hard to become, all of it seems to quietly step aside. You feel smaller, you feel younger. You feel, in some way you cannot quite name, like you are back under someone else's authority. Even though you are a fully grown adult who pays their own bills, makes their own decisions, and has not lived in that house for years. If that feeling is familiar to you, this video is for you. It is one of the most disorienting experiences a person can have. To know intellectually that you are an adult and yet to feel, emotionally, like a child. And the confusion is often made worse by the fact that nobody around you seems to acknowledge it. Family gatherings carry on. Conversations happen, and you sit there quietly wondering why you cannot simply be yourself in the one place that is supposed to know you best. Let us look at what is actually happening. One of the most useful ideas in psychology is that the family is not simply a collection of individuals. It functions more like a system, a living arrangement with its own unspoken rules, its own internal logic, and its own way of distributing roles. Every member of a family tends to occupy a position within that system, and those positions are often assigned very early in life, long before a child has any capacity to question or resist them. One child becomes the responsible one, another becomes the difficult one. One is the peacemaker, another is the one who is never quite taken seriously. These roles are not usually chosen consciously by anyone. They emerge from the pressures, fears, and unresolved histories of the adults in the room. But once a role is assigned, the system works hard to maintain it. Because roles create predictability, and predictability feels safe, even when it is painful. The problem is that roles assigned to a 7-year-old do not automatically dissolve when that child turns 30. The system remembers, and when you return to it, the system gently, and sometimes not so gently, nudges you back into position. This is one reason why a highly capable adult can walk into a family dinner and suddenly find themselves unable to speak up, unable to hold a boundary, unable to feel like their opinion matters. It is not weakness. It is the weight of a very old script pressing down on a very old wound. There is something else worth understanding here, and it sits a little deeper. The nervous system is not a neutral recorder of events. It is a survival machine, and it learns. When you were a child, your nervous system was paying close attention to the emotional environment around you. It was learning what was safe and what was dangerous, what earned approval and what earned withdrawal, what kind of person you needed to be in order to stay connected to the people you depended on for survival. That learning does not simply disappear with age. It lives in the body. It lives in the way your shoulders tighten when a certain tone of voice enters the room. It lives in the way your throat closes when you try to say something honest to someone who has historically punished your honesty. It lives in the way you apologize before you have even done anything wrong. When you return to the environment where that learning first happened, the nervous system does not wait for your rational mind to assess the situation. It responds first, and it responds fast. It pulls you back into the posture of the child who once needed to manage that environment in order to feel safe. That is not a failure of your character. That is the intelligence of a system that once protected you, now running a program that no longer fits. There is a philosophical dimension to this that is worth sitting with. Several thinkers across history have observed that the self is not a fixed, finished thing. It is something that is always in the process of being shaped by the relationships and environments it moves through. Who we are in one room is not always who we are in another. And the rooms of our childhood carry a particular gravity, because they were the rooms in which we first learned what it meant to exist in relation to other people. This is not a comfortable idea, because it challenges the notion that we are entirely self-made. But it is also, in a quiet way, a liberating one, because if the self is shaped by relationship, then it can also be reshaped by relationship. The patterns are not permanent. They are learned, and what is learned can, with time and awareness, be unlearned, or at least understood well enough that it no longer runs the show without your knowledge. Now, it is important to say clearly, not every family dynamic is the same, and not every family is harmful. Some families are genuinely loving, and the shrinking feeling that arises within them is simply the echo of old patterns that no longer reflect the current reality. In those cases, the work is largely internal, learning to update the emotional story you carry about who you are in that space. But for some people, the dynamic is more persistent and more painful. Family guilt is a particularly powerful force. It can be used, sometimes deliberately and sometimes without any conscious awareness, to keep adult children in a state of emotional obligation. The message, spoken or unspoken, is something like, your needs are a burden, your boundaries are a betrayal, your independence is a form of abandonment. When that message has been delivered consistently over many years, it becomes very difficult to separate your own sense of what is right from the anxiety of disappointing someone who matters to you. Emotional boundaries within families are genuinely harder to hold than boundaries in almost any other relationship. This is partly because the stakes feel so high. The fear of rejection, of conflict, of being cast out from the family unit is one of the oldest and most primal fears a human being can carry. And it is partly because the people who most need to hear your boundary are often the people who taught you, implicitly or explicitly, that your needs did not matter. Holding a boundary in that context is not a small thing. It is, in many ways, an act of profound self-respect. So what can you actually do with all of this? The first thing is simply to name what is happening. When you notice that shrinking feeling, try to observe it with a little distance rather than being swept away by it. You might say to yourself, quietly, this is an old pattern. This is my nervous system responding to a familiar environment. This is not the whole truth of who I am. That small act of naming can create just enough space between the feeling and your response to give you a moment of genuine choice. The second thing is to be honest about what you can and cannot change in the short term. You may not be able to transform a decades-old family dynamic in a single conversation, but you can decide, in small and specific ways, how much of yourself you are willing to offer in any given interaction. You can choose which conversations to engage with and which to let pass. You can decide what you will and will not accept. And you can practice holding that decision with as much steadiness as you can manage, even when it is uncomfortable. The third thing, and perhaps the most important, is to build a life outside the family system that reflects who you actually are. The antidote to being defined by an old role is to live consistently and visibly as the person you have become. The more real and grounded that life feels, the less power the old script has to pull you back. You are not the child you once were. You are someone who survived that childhood, learned from it, and is still in the process of becoming. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, everything. If this video reached something real for you, take a moment to sit with it. And if you would like to explore more ideas about the inner life, about patterns, relationships, and the quiet work of becoming yourself, Inside the Labyrinth is here for exactly that. Subscribe if you would like to stay close to this kind of thinking. And if this spoke to a part of you that rarely gets heard, stay with that feeling for a moment. You are not broken because you feel deeply. You are only beginning to understand yourself. Subscribe to Inside the Labyrinth for more reflections on the hidden patterns of the human mind.